Okay, welcome to a special edition Q&A session with the lovely RotaGeek implementation team, where we're going to myth bust the challenge of moving to a new workforce management provider. We're going to ask a series of questions, mix it up, make sure we're speaking to different implementation managers to get different perspective from their side, but really trying to get under the hood of implementations in general and kick those fears to touch with regards to moving to a new provider. So first up, we have Michael, and just going to start with a general opener, really, Michael, around why do clients fear that change? And from your perspective, with some of the implementations you've done, what do you think the clients hesitate to leave their current providers, even if they're not happy with that current provider? Why do you think that might be?
Yeah, I think, Tom, a lot of people think that it's going to be taking a really long time, going to be quite complex. The change management is going to be difficult within their teams, or they don't think they're going to get a return on that investment. But we'd like to disagree with that and think that we absolutely can.
Okay, so now we've got a bit of an understanding as to why clients might fear the change. Let's go back a step, Jazz, and look at what does our implementation actually look like. Can you maybe walk us through a typical RotaGeek implementation from start to finish? Have we got certain phases that we go through?
Of course. So when we get a new customer come into implementation and we start the project, we start off with their kick-off meeting first, which will kind of go over their requirements and what's been agreed throughout the contract process. And then we obviously get to meet the customers as well. And then we move into the discovery and design phase. And that's a really good opportunity for us to really understand what it is that they're looking to gain from RotaGeek. We go through a couple of documents that we get them to complete as well. So the documents that they complete is what helps us do their configuration on their RotaGeek system. So we'll have a couple of calls just to make sure there is a clear understanding, and there are times where we would challenge them and make sure that they know their processes. There might be certain things that they haven't discussed yet, so we'll just bring those to everyone's attention and have a really open and honest conversation. We then move on to kind of the build and test, where I will go away, build their RotaGeek for them, give a playback, and then give them access to RotaGeek as well, and that's when they will go away and start their testing. And from then onwards, we'll keep in regular contact, have weekly calls, just to make sure everything is running smoothly and all the in-betweens. And then we go into train and deploy. So book their training in with our training manager and kind of make sure that they're ready to take the next step. And then they will move into the go live stage. So that's a typical step by step. But obviously there's loads of little steps in between as well that we do.
That's really great, Jazz. I think obviously under the impression that some customers will take longer at certain things, and you mentioned that we've got some reliance on them to provide us with, data in a timely manner. Could you maybe say how long or the average time to get these customers live would be from a RotaGeek perspective? And is that fairly similar to other competitors, or do you think we're kind of a bit ahead of the curve there?
I'd like to think we're a bit ahead of other competitors that are out there. When we say how long it takes to implement, this can vary depending on a lot on the customer and on our side, I suppose, as well. So typically we're looking around 3 months or 12 weeks, anywhere up until 6 months. But that all depends on what's actually required as part of the project. So if it's just a simple digital scheduling, no integrations, no nothing, we can get that done fairly quick, even without even before the 12 weeks. But if there are the parts of the project as well, or the implementation, then it can take up a little bit longer. So
yeah, and you mentioned within the kind of design discovery stage, where there's a reliance on the customer to provide us with certain information or details. Are there any other parts within the implementation where the client has an input and needs to take responsibility on certain things, or is it mainly within that stage?
No, I would say there's ownership on the customer at fairly every stage. Obviously, we work together on the whole implementation side, but doing the testing, making sure they have a list of their own scenarios that are relevant to their organisation. So it's quite important for them to know the parts of RotaGeek that they need to test. So, obviously we're here to help them throughout the process as well, but I think that's quite a big ownership on them. But anything to do with configuration and stuff, that's kind of
And
our
I
job.
guess there's a big reliance on the customer when it comes to their own training down that message to the rest of the users. We can only go so far.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming there's a big reliance on the customer from a change management perspective as well.
Yes, of course, yeah. So we also, obviously, we help them out in terms of the standard testing that they should do, and then they have their own testing that needs to be done, but that's on them to then relay that message internally as well. And obviously, if internally they have more questions, then that's our responsibility to help answer those questions if they're unsure. So that is something, again, that is on the customer.
Brilliant, that's really insightful, Jazz. I think we've touched on how the client needs to participate and meet us halfway with regards to implementations in general. But moving to yourself, Ant, what would you say should the client expect to be responsible for during implementation? Maybe we can dig into that a little bit further.
So, from my perspective, I think the most important thing they have to be responsible for is actually all the fact finding of obviously all the details we need for the discovery session, because that obviously will influence the entire project in the direction we take certain configurations and stuff like that. So that, for me, is the most important piece that the customer has to, from the early stage of the project, need to deliver.
And do you think in order to get that information, they need a certain team or certain champions? Who would you kind of suggest would be good people to identify early on for that?
Yeah, so 100%. So the most important kind of stakeholders we would expect to have are people from like HR, operations, payroll teams that actually know that they're the experts in their fields for the customers we work with, and they're vital for the project to move in the right direction. They also need to be those decision makers where if there is something that needs deciding from a project perspective, they're the people we can go to get quick answers out of. So yeah.
That's absolutely crucial. And can you suggest what clients can maybe do themselves once they get to that point to ensure a smooth implementation? Would there be a fair amount of hand-holding from the implementation manager on that front?
It's a collaboration. So every step of the project, we work very closely with customers. In RotaGeek, we don't just configure what a customer tells us to configure. We like to ask the questions, why do you need this? So it's because the way we see it is we want the customers to get the most out of our product, and we may have better ways of doing things with the product. So it's not just about clients repeating the same processes they've already got. It's about actually how we can improve those processes by doing things differently. And that's why the whole project is a collaboration, from the discovery, from even like UAT, like obviously there's things that we know about our platform that we can influence customers on the certain things they could be looking for.
And I'm sure those conversations can get quite interesting and entertaining on that note, where you're challenging what they maybe currently do. Is that fair?
They can be, because because you're looking at processes that certain clients might have had maybe for years, and that whole change management piece can obviously, it needs to be a factor in the project. So obviously bringing that to the table early on, selling the why the clients are choosing RotaGeek from the get-go, it obviously supports that long-term piece around us looking at the processes. And like we've done a whole process mapping with some of our customers where we look at their current processes and what the new world will look like, to support customers just understanding how they can get those efficiencies out of using the platform. So yeah.
And that's really great, because that touches on the next questions we've got for Michael with regards to RotaGeek's approach to support generally. So there's maybe three threads here that we can look at with your insights, Michael. But how do you think we set up clients for success before implementation even starts. Are there any tricks of the trade that you could share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done this before, right? So we have project plans that are templated and yet flexible. We've got documentation for the customer for specification of the files that they're going to integrate with us. We give them some video tutorials to share with stakeholders about how the process will work and the product's functionality itself. We really kind of put all of that together right from the outset with the customer and ensure that the project goals are decided up front. And that we've got those business objectives clearly defined as well.
And I think obviously to prepare them for what's to come, I'm assuming you will try and share those documents or those requirement docs as early as possible, to get them up to speed with what sort of data that we need to collect for them. Would that be right?
Yeah, right from the outset, it's one of the most important things because we're going to need the customer's input from there. As Anthony said, we need to get the right subject matter experts on board. We need to be really clear about what the requirements are, how we need the data presenting, so that we can actually configure the system in the most efficient way as possible.
And obviously, things don't always go to plan, right? There's going to be some curveballs. How does the team at RotaGeek kind of proactively manage potential risks or delays that will hit the project? Are there any nuggets that you can give us today to help
absolutely.
us?
So we have regular check-ins with the project team and those key stakeholders to ensure that project is on plan. We define milestones in the project to ensure that we're on track to achieve those and keep to the customer's timeline. We also have clearly defined Reiki, which is a document which outlines the customer team, the RotaGeek team, who is responsible and accountable for those different actions within the project. So everyone's really clear about what their role in the project is to start with. We also have some key people within the project that are not closely involved with the implementation, but from an escalation points, we have the project sponsor on the customer side, but also we have escalation points on the RotaGeek side to make sure that we're staying true to ourselves and aligned.
Because these things can happen, and it's good to know that you're engaging with the right people at the customer side, so that if things do need to be escalated, there's full visibility of that, which I think is crucial. So maybe jumping back to yourself, Anne, and looking at some of those pitfalls and how we can help avoid them as much as possible. What are some of the common pitfalls that you've seen in workforce management implementations, potentially RotaGeek implementations that you've done? Or elsewhere? I know you've got a bit of a background in retail, so.
Yeah, so, I mean, if that change management piece hasn't been done effectively with all project stakeholders, I've seen delays of projects where you might not have the right stakeholders involved in the project, delays on data gathering. Those are some of the common pitfalls. Just ensuring you've got the experts in the room that can answer the questions that you need. That is really what will set you up for success.
What's RotaGeek's approach to set them up for success long term, post-implementation? They're up and running, they're live. What's the things to think about there?
We're very close with customer success from the get-go. So customer success joins the kickoff with us, and we ensure that they are getting regular updates. They even sometimes join some of the other sessions we do, like discovery sessions, just so they understand what is important to the customer and what they're trying to get out of using RotaGeek. That way, when the customer does transition to BAU, they have a holistic view of exactly what the customer was looking to achieve through implementation. And then they're very close with the customer at that point when they do get to that BAU stage.
From the point that the customer touches the platform, we give them access to our support team. That will not only help them in knowledge and guidance on how to use the system, but also long term, if they have any challenges with use, new functionality, I just have a question about I can't log in or something as simple as that, our support team are available to reach out. So we'll make sure that during the implementation process, as we close the project down, that's a seamless transition into our support function.
Just kind of following on from what the guys have said, we also, when we're looking at getting the training done for the customers, that training is tailored according to each customer's setup and their configuration. So we work really closely with the training manager to make sure she has an understanding of what all the requirements are. So even later down the line, if there are any questions, she's aware of
Oh, so that's
what
something
their
implementation doesn't do? You've got
No, we
someone
have our own
separate.
trainer,
Okay.
yes. And we have a very close relationship. So like I mentioned again, we go through the full configuration, give an insight of what the organisation is, what their requirements are. So that whole training is then tailored according to their requirements.
Face-to-face as well as virtual, or
Yes.
is it tends to be one or the other?
No, face-to-face as well as virtual, all depends.
I mean, I think integrations is obviously a big part of a lot of the implementations that we cover. Other than getting the right people in the room, are there any other top tips that you would say to keep a really smooth and efficient transition for setting up those integrations?
Integrations, documentation is key. We've done a lot of integrations with different vendors and different platforms, and documentation is basically what we'll support from the get-go. We've had customers where they don't have any documentation. They might have custom builds of different HR providers where we will work with them and have multiple discovery sessions just to understand exactly what logic they need to have for obviously the integrations to work. But not having the documentation can mean that obviously that whole piece of work will take longer, because then you've got the added workload of having to do the discoveries and really think about how those integrations should be working.
Makes total sense. I think moving on to yourself, Jazz, just turning the wheel here, looking at, we've talked about milestones, certain milestones that we have as part of our implementation. What would you say are the biggest aha moments for the customer side during this changeover to a new provider and our implementation? Are there certain points within the implementation where the penny drops and they kind of understand what they're trying to get out of the platform?
I think it starts fairly early with when they're in implementation, so the discovery and design aspect or stage of the project, only because you ask them questions. There's times where they don't even know what's going on. So you have, like, the guys mentioned before, having the right people on these calls, and they're all talking, and then the kind of questions you're asking them, and then you can see their brains ticking as way, and then you pick it up, and then as they're explaining to you, okay, well, this is what we want, or this is how we think it's going to work, you can then kind of help guide them the best use of RotaGeek, and then they think, oh, okay, so we can do that. Oh, how is that going to work for us? The way they ask the questions, or the way I ask the questions, or anyone on the team asks, I think from that point onwards, the penny drops for them. And then once they get the build as well, because they're not just sat there watching me sharing my screen, or watching anyone else from RotaGeek sharing their screen. They're actually having a go themselves. And then, I think once they get their hands on, the questions start coming in, and that's when I say the project, it gets a bit juicy, it gets fun from then onward.
That's really helpful, Jazz. I think we've touched on a number of the different stages within implementation, but Ant, we're going to come back to you, because now we're getting into the deep stuff from a complex customer perspective. And I know with your time at RotaGeek, you've probably handled a few of those in your time. So how do you think we yourselves at RotaGeek adapt the implementation process for particularly big enterprise complex clients? Potentially they've got lots of sites, or there's maybe even union agreements involved. How have you kind of adapted the process?
So we have a standard kind of template of how, like, the events that happen within projects and things like that, but we're not restricted to that. So we are flexible with what we need to do to achieve, like deliver the project. So things like the discovery sessions where we need to understand all the configurations for the scheduling, all the payrolls and integration requirements, that may not be one meeting, depending on how complex, the customer is. So that could be 3 meetings, it could be 5 meetings, it could be 7 meetings. So we don't restrict ourselves into just sticking to one discovery session. If there's more needed, we will have more meetings basically to understand all the requirements and deliver the project.
So kind of break down some of the fundamentals of the platform build into separate discovery sessions so that you're not missing any details. Interesting. Do you have any examples where on that basis you had to still do these series of different discoveries but also had to keep to some tight timelines? Is that a tricky one to juggle?
It definitely can be. Payrolls is one that is very complex, where there's lots of rules. Like you might have a customer that's got lots of different rules and they don't necessarily articulate exactly how that behaviour should happen. So with payrolls, there tend to be multiple like discovery sessions and also a UAT phase where we've obviously got all the like test scenarios, and based on the payrolls that we've built, these are the scenarios that you should be testing. So we support customers with that. But again, it doesn't mean once we've delivered that, we walk away. If there is something that may have been missed, we always go we'll go back to the design and test and ensure that it is delivered correctly.
And I think it comes back to having the right people in the room, because once you start digging into these aspects of the platform, you need the right people to be having conversations if you are challenging, for instance, or even just to understand what's the process now, can we improve it, can we make it better? I can see them being fairly difficult conversations, as we mentioned with Jazz earlier, but part and parcel of the gig, right? Excellent, awesome. So we're going to round off with last question to Michael, and hopefully we'll be able to maybe give some insights for potential prospect customers that will be looking to move to a different workforce management provider. But what would you say to a potential client, Michael, who's dragging their feet because the switch feels a bit too daunting, a bit too overwhelming? What would you say to give them some reassurance?
Yeah, I would say, come and give us a go. We've done this before. We've got some very formalised but flexible kind of templates to take a lot of the heavy lifting of the project management away from you. It's really about engaging the whole organisation in the change management piece. I think the biggest challenge is getting everybody on the same journey with you in the organisation. And I quite often ask the question, kind of, what's in it for me from every stakeholder? So the end users, the management team, the C-suite, kind of what the value are they getting out of the transition to RotaGeek? And I think if we can answer all of those questions for those different stakeholder groups, everybody gets on board and it goes really smoothly.
The interesting thing I see though from customers is when they see our implementation style versus other vendors they've worked with, it's like night and day, because we're not consultants they have to book in, and then they get a 2-week notice of, you've got that consultant in 2 weeks. We work with the customers every step of the way. So if they need to jump on a quick call, they don't have to like book it in 2 weeks in advance. We can be quite flexible.
I think that's a massive differentiator in terms of our approach versus other maybe bigger organizations that have to have a project manager, have to have a consultant that actually does the work, booking in against a certain budget. Like that's, quite a big call out as a different differentiator for.
And there's no cancellation fees as well if they can't make a meeting or if they've had to change a meeting as well. So I think that's really
the flexibility
really
on jumping on a call is as easy as that. Isn't a case of booking in weeks in advance or whatever. There's a lot more scope to act quickly, right? Be as agile as possible.
And we're also the experts of the product, right? The whole entire product. So we're not necessarily restricted to have to rely on someone else to get involved in. Like obviously there's certain things with integrations you need product and developers, but when it comes to configuring auto schedules or payrolls, that is what we own. So we're not reliant on other team members to have to. We pretty much do the entire. We do the entire configuration. And again, I feel like from what I've heard from clients in the past, is that delay where they're reliant on other people from vendors to have to get involved and do different configurations for different parts of the platforms, where we don't have that reliance, where we know the product, we're the experts.
But that's what makes us quite personal, actually, and relatable. And we're not just robots. We're not just here to tell you what to do. We care. We want to get inside your head a wee bit as to how you operate. We'll then base that on how you best use the product in a certain configuration to get the most out of it. Like, that's in a nutshell. And sometimes things are overcomplicated, where you just need another human to talk to. Hopefully the other humans on their side that play a role in the scheduling process, make sure you make good collaborative decisions together and have a good end result. So as we have all of you, I'm not going to direct this question just at one person, but in your opinion, where we have a scenario that a customer has been burnt, okay, they've had a bad experience with their current workforce management provider, they're really nervous about moving across, what would be the sorts of strategies that Rotogeek would adopt to give them that assurance that it's not going to happen again, but give them confidence that you'll implement a really efficient and smooth workforce management platform?
So from the get-go, during the kick-off, we clearly define what the project goals are, what we're actually going to what the product needs to deliver for the customer. We also go through their business objectives, like why they bought Rotogeek, what they're trying to, what they want to get out of the product long term as well from a business strategy perspective, and then obviously define on who those key individuals are on the customer side, so we have the right people in the room to make those decisions, and clear accountability for the different stages of the project. So
because I think if you can assign roles and responsibilities to a good, thorough project team, we're going to leave no stone unturned, right? So hopefully puts us in a good position.
Yeah, I think it's about understanding where the customers potentially had problems before with other providers, and really kind of deep diving into that during the kick-off phase. If they find that the project is going well and they want to increase the pace, we're open to do that. Also, if they want to slow that down in terms of their deployment to get that degree of confidence and the engagement from their teams, we're flexible to also do that as well.
So looking at more like a phased deployment, picking a subset of users.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or applications.
Yeah.
Cool. Jazz, did you have anything else?
I think just kind of following on from what the guys have said as well, they've gone through a few of the different phases, but also when they're in UAT as well, obviously the configuration is done, they will have a lot more questions then, and it's again tailoring around their questions and making sure that they're getting the most out of Rotogeek, and we're helping them provide that. And it could be things like additional training, or they want to change the way the training is being executed from our end. So it's just understanding and making sure that they're happy.
So maybe trying to get into the problem child from their previous provider, what happened, and maybe try and unravel that within the UAT that they do with us. So really putting to bed any of those fears, stopping that from happening again, I think that'd be super helpful. Yeah. So Rotogeek's clearly doing well. Implementations are going great. How would you say we differ, or Rotogeek differs from a larger workforce management provider in the way that you operate the personnel that's needed to implement?
So we don't use contractors, for example, so everything is done in-house. I wear quite a few different hats as an implementation manager. I'm a project manager, but also I do all the configuration. What I find is customers value that massively, because we know all the back-end stuff, and we know all the settings, and we can answer all the weird and wonderful questions really quickly, rather than having to wait to speak to a consultant. That can take a couple of weeks sometimes. So we're quite nimble, and we can obviously, we can make projects move a lot quicker, rather than customers having to wait to get an answer for, maybe it could be the smallest little setting where we can just answer it in a quick call with a client.
Absolutely. Excellent stuff. Thank you all for your feedback and your answers there have been super, super helpful.